For those listeners that you have who are old enough to remember the Reagan years, you may remember that Reagan won the election by a landslide, not by the narrow margin that Trump did. And there was a national mandate to reduce the size of government. That mandate was derailed by Congress, both Democrats and Republican, within 6 months of Mr. Reagan's inauguration. So if you're looking at how this administration might reduce debt, deficits, and government spending, it's important to look at what they did in terms of the recent budget and the continuing resolution. And it's also important, I think, to look at the history of the last major effort that we had to reform our government, which was sadly very unsuccessful.
So I imagine you think this one will be unsuccessful as well, this attempt?
There's no certainties in life, but I would suggest that the probabilities go that way. The problems are very large, and I think it's useful for investors, including the investors on this call, to understand some of them. And I'm not talking about the narrative problems. I'm not talking about Republicans' perceptions or Democrats' perceptions. I'm talking about arithmetic. The on-balance sheet liabilities of the federal government, which is to say what we owe each other and other people, the bondholders, exceeds $36 trillion, or $30 trillion net of the Fed's own balance sheet. That's a pretty big problem when you think about the gross government revenues before any expenditures are $5 trillion. But a bigger problem is the off-balance sheet liabilities, the net present value of unfunded government promises, things like Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, military pensions, federal government pensions, the Environmental Trust Fund. These types of things exceed, according to the Congressional Budget Office, $100 trillion. That's at the federal level, before state, local, corporate, and individual debt. If you add the on-balance sheet liabilities to the off-balance sheet liabilities of the United States government, what you find out is that at the federal level, we're $130 billion in net indebtedness. That, in turn, is problematic when you look at the aggregate net worth of American people. The Internal Revenue Service, who makes it their business to know what you're worth, suggests that the aggregate net worth, private net worth of American citizens is $141 trillion. And of that, $130 trillion is pledged. This is the nature of the problem. This is a real problem. My suspicion, which will tie this back to investments and finance, is that the way that we deal with this program is, yes, we finesse some of the net present value. We raise the entitlement age for Social Security, stuff like that. But that really doesn't matter. My suspicion is that what we do as a society is what we did in the decade of the 1970s. We debase the currency. We reduce the purchasing power of our obligations so that we honor our obligations in a nominal sense, but not in a real sense. The Office of Management and Budget suggests to us that in the decade 1970 to 1971, the purchasing power of the US dollar was reduced by 75%, which means that $1,000 of savings in 1980 bought $250 worth of goods in 1971 prices. It is not coincidental, I think, Anthony, that during a period when the purchasing power of the US dollar declined by 75%, that the gold price increased 30-fold. I'm not suggesting that the gold price will go up 30-fold from here, but I am suggesting that in the next 10 years, the purchasing power of the US dollar in terms of devaluing our debts will go down by 75%. And I suspect that assets that have traditionally done well during periods of time when the purchasing power was under fire will do well. And I suggest that gold is one of those assets.